Welcome to the Spotlight on Building Networks and Buy-in. My name is Anjali Nandi, and I will be your host as we walk through skills and strategies for building networks and getting stakeholder buy-in. Over the past 20 years, I have provided treatment services to folks struggling with addiction, as well as people in trouble with the law. I also serve as a consultant to criminal justice organizations, human service agencies, and treatment providers. The Center for Health and Safety Culture, sponsoring this spotlight, is an interdisciplinary center serving communities and organizations through research, training, and guidance to cultivate healthy and safe cultures. Prevention coordinators are often asked to build networks. But what are networks, and how do we go about building them? In this spotlight, we will cover the answers to these questions, as well as some skills and strategies for building networks and getting stakeholder buy-in. So let's start with what networks are. Networks are informal and flexible gatherings of people, connections across people, ideally across diverse organizations. Diversity is important because it offers different ways of looking at a particular situation. It allows access to different resources and can highlight aspects of both problems and solutions that may not have been previously considered. In a network, there is shared responsibility and ownership, and yet everyone has something different to offer. Networks have the capacity to mobilize resources through collaborations, so when you're building a network, pay attention to what your goal is. What is the problem you're trying to solve, and who are the folks with the most resources to help solve that problem? Networks are particularly helpful when addressing complex problems that have so many components or facets to them. For example, addiction issues or underage drinking. These are complex problems, and complex problems require complex solutions. Diverse networks are able to bring complex solutions because networks bring with them varied resources. And by resources, I don't just mean financial resources. I mean ideas, enthusiasm, and commitment as well. Networks are a group of people that get together that need some coordination. It's not so much as prevention coordinators you're supervising this group, but you're a coordinator where you're inviting roles or strategizing with them and keeping the energy going of the network. So you're less of a supervisor and more of a coordinator and energizer. And you also need a strategic lens. Networking, fundamentally, is a strategy of empowerment. It helps people organize and mobilize towards a shared goal. Networking empowers groups and allows everyone to have a voice in the process of decision-making. Through networks, we develop strong social connections. This brings about social change. In networks, people from diverse backgrounds who have faced a variety of struggles are able to come together to overcome an objective. This is able to facilitate an interaction of different parts of the community that wouldn't ordinarily have this conversation. Networks offer opportunities to increase communication, but they also allow a sharing of information and knowledge in a way that's different. Good networking builds positive relationships, and it allows for shared resources towards a common goal. An example of networking might be if the issue is attending to underage drinking and drug use, for example. As a prevention coordinator, you might be thinking about who all might be involved in this network. Who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are more than just parents or the kids. They're also teachers, law enforcement officials, schools, small businesses. So when we start to think more broadly about who has a stake in this matter, you're able to get very diverse voices to come together and attend to this societal issue. It is important to continually pay attention to the health of the network. So attending to what sustains the network becomes really important. There are several things that cause a network that has a lot of momentum to start to stall. Here are some ideas to think about to help keep the momentum up when you have a network that's already put together. Use your resources wisely and involve all sectors. And by sectors, I mean different facets of your community, like schools or law enforcement or small businesses. So involve all sectors and stakeholders from a variety of different points of view. Allow access to resources and really pay attention to who has the resources, how they're being used, and how to provide feedback to them about the resources they use, as well as the outcomes of the resources they provided towards this network. And again, resources could be finances, but it could also be time, or it could be ideas or strategies. It could be connections, additional connections. So think broadly about this term, resources. Most often, when people join a network, they're volunteering their time, and therefore providing ongoing, timely feedback about outcomes becomes really important to sustain their engagement. Focus on a common goal. However, make it realistic and help people stay accountable within your network. Here are some considerations when building your network. Pay attention to involvement versus responsibility. Make sure people know that when they are becoming a part of some initiative that brings you together, it's more than them just attending for the sake of receiving the information. Their role is as a contributor to whatever goal you may be working towards. It's definitely a two-way street, and be proactive about sustaining this two-way street so that you're responding really quickly when they're asking questions, but you're also holding them to a certain level of expectation. So balance this involvement versus responsibility. Another thing to pay attention to is coordination versus control. You are the coordinator of this network. You might need to assign projects to other people in the network, but make sure you are coordinating as opposed to supervising or controlling what's happening. Pay attention to whether the person is a part of your network or if they are a person representing an organization. Pay attention to whether the information is just being shared for the sake of it or whether information is being shared in order to take action. Ideally, there's always a purpose behind sharing information. And so when information is shared, pay attention to how this is going to impact what actions take place. Make sure there is a clear expectation regarding what the action steps are. Everyone needs to leave knowing what they're doing next. Pay attention to focus versus inclusion. There might be times where you want to include a large number of people into this network or project that you're putting together as a prevention coordinator. And the more people that get involved, the less focus you sometimes have. So pay attention to this tug between attention to focus and being open to new members. There's a balance in there that you'll need to strike, and sometimes it depends on the project that you're taking on. Pay attention to process versus structure. How much structure is necessary in order to support an active and engaged process? If there's no structure, there tends to be a lot of waste of time. If there's too much structure, people's engagement tends to drop. So let's get practical now. What sorts of skills and strategies might be helpful in order for us to build a network? Start by getting your frame right. And by that I mean, get into the right frame of mind. Remember what your goal is. Although it's easy to sometimes get sidetracked or overly passionate about what we believe in, keep in mind what your goal is. Your goal is to develop connections and social support for whatever the target is that you're going to be working on. Your goal is not to convince people or get them to agree with you. Your goal is to get them involved. Get them passionate about whatever the material is that you're talking about. Get them curious, maybe even get them worried. When you put people together who are passionate, you will get results. To go out there and lead with concern and with curiosity. Really work to understand your community. Work to understand the community and the problem. And by that I mean ask lots of questions. Get curious. See if you can engage people in solutions. If you're going to a large event and you are worried about meeting so many new people and you're feeling a little introverted in the moment, prepare well. Try to stay away from your phone. Every opportunity is an opportunity to network. And if someone sees you attending to your phone instead of attending to them, they will disengage from you. If you're going to a big event, prior to that event, you can make connections with people via email or via instant message so that you have some connection to the folks before meeting at large events. This will help a little bit if you're feeling introverted. So let's summarize what we've talked about so far. We started with defining what a network is and talking about why these networks are so important. We talked about how to sustain a network and some of the things that unfortunately get in our way. We talked about considerations to pay attention to in order to keep a network going. And then we ended with a few strategies that are really helpful for you to go out there and build some of these networks and get stakeholder buy-in. Thank you so much for joining me. Feel free to follow us on social media or join our email list for our newsletter and announcements about upcoming events.